Hey guys, how are you? I have a video this week, and this week we are starting our first magical realist novel. We are starting our first magical realist novel with Laura Esquivel's Like Water for Chocolates. But before we start, remember there is our shop where we have books and writing services. We have a book coming out at the end of this month. We also have our Redbubble shop that has over 100 different designs on it. So check that out. We just put a couple of new designs on a week ago. So if you want to check those out. And remember, our new book's coming out at the end of the month. So if you want to be notified about that before then, sign up for the newsletter. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, and share, because that really helps us. Okay, so our first book is a book from Mexico. It is by Laura Esquivel. It is called Like Water for Chocolates. And I decided to start with this one because actually this is the first magical realist novel I ever read. And I think is probably, when it comes to magical realism, probably the most, especially as we are defining it, magical realism from Latin America, is probably one of the easiest ones to really engage with. It is from 1989. This one is obviously later because it's a translation. It's not in the original Spanish. But it's from 1989. It was so big it obviously got translated, which is a long time after the big boom, Latin American boom that saw of the 50s and 60s that saw the probably the most influential magical realist authors writing. But this one is also magical realism. Now, this book has a very unusual structure. Firstly, on the surface, as the straight plot, it is the story of three sisters, Rosaria, the eldest, Gertrudis, the middle sister, and Tida, the youngest sister. Now, they are the daughters of wealthy ranchers, and their mother has a very peculiar notion of the roles that, well, certainly Tida is going to live. So it's the story of these three sisters, but primarily it's the story of Tida. Tida is the youngest of the daughters. She is condemned in some ways by family tradition to not marry, to remain unmarried, to look after her mother until her mother dies. The setting of the book is turn of the century Mexico, so around the time of the independence. It's certainly a time of a lot of wars. It looks at women's lives, whereas a lot of magical realism looks at politics from a male perspective. This one is looking at politics and the world and society from a female perspective. So Tida is condemned to look after her mother until her mother dies, which means that the man she's in love with, Pedro, she's forbidden from marrying. And a solution, because Pedro is a eligible bachelor, the solution is for Pedro to marry her elder sister, which is somewhat a unique form of torture to Tita, who is forced to live in the house with the man she loves, who actually loves her, while he's married to her sister. Yeah, this is a unique form of torture that has been devised in this. But Tita, on top of living in this unusual, shall we say, this unusual living arrangement in her family, has also become the household cook. She has, her mother has been fairly disinclined to really engage with her, so not only is her mother condemning her to a life of servitude, but she's also not particularly, she's not at all nice to her. She really is in this second tier, third tier position. So even after her mother dies, she remains in this household because her lack of marriage renders her dependent. She is now outside marriageable age once her mother dies, and she is dependent and is treated again by her elder sister as a subservient family member, not as a younger sister, but as more or less a servant. So this is this world that Tita is living in. This is a very it's a world where she has very limited freedoms. And it's a world where women have very limited freedoms. The whole story is told in monthly installments of different recipes. The whole thing is told through food. So because Tita is a cook, her major form of self-expression is her cooking. And each of the dishes plays an integral part in the narrative of that chapter. So there are 12 chapters, there are 12 dishes. The 12 dishes reflect what is happening in the chapter. So there is the chapter with the wedding cake, and there is the chapter with the quails in rose petals. All sorts of different chapters that all contribute to the narrative. So it's talking very much about the fact that the evidence of women's lives is often not in great art or literature or works in the outside world, but they are domestic things. It is in the embroidery, in the home skills, the knitting skills, the sewing skills, and the cooking skills. This does have recipes in it. There are all sorts of different recipes. They're a bit hard to decipher, but if you read it closely enough, you probably could work out how to do this. But you have to read the whole text. The instructions are in the text. So this is quail in rose petal sauce. This is the one that inflames Gertrudis. So 12 roses, preferably red, 12 chestnuts, 2 teaspoons butter, 2 teaspoons corn flour, 2 drops attar of roses, 2 tablespoons anise, 2 tablespoons honey, 2 cloves garlic, 6 quails, 1 piata. I'm not sure what a piata is. And they're Mexican dishes. So this starts out with, remove the petals carefully from the roses, trying not to prick your fingers, for not only are the little wounds painful, but the petals could soak up the blood, and that might alter the flavour of the dish, and even produce dangerous chemical reactions. How could Tita remember such a thing, shaken as she was to get a bouquet of roses, and from Pedro besides? It was the first deep emotion she had felt since her sister's wedding, when she had heard Pedro confirm his love, trying to hide it from everyone's prying eyes. And so you see, there is instruction in there, but it's throughout the entire chapter. It's throughout the entire chapter. One of the things that I coincidentally, I actually made a Mexican dish, not one of the ones in this, but it actually gave me a bit of an insight into Tita when I was thinking about this. I made a birra consomme. I didn't cook it with goat, I cooked it with mushrooms. But what I discovered is, you make a traditional Mexican dish, 2 hours, not enough. You needed to start that thing not at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was really good. The fact that I sort of stopped and made something else for dinner and left everything in a state where it could be left, and so it had 48 hours of sitting, actually did really well. Had it last night, beautiful. But I'll link the video that I found it in, because it was really good. But it gives you an idea of just how, it gave me an idea of just how trapped Tita is in that kitchen. How incredibly oppressive domestic labour is for women who are in that traditional mode. Yes, Tita is the cook. She's not having to do the laundry and this and that and the other. But at the same time, just the cooking. When you look at these recipes, she's cooking for a household. She's not cooking for one person. No, there's no well, wax some pasta on and some sauce that you made ages ago and it's in a jar and, a nice quick dinner. No, she's cooking big, elaborate, expensive. There's nothing in here that explicitly says how wealthy they are, until you realize almost every single dish is meat-based. This is not peasant food. These are wealthy ranchers. Every dish is big, it serves multiple people, and it is expensive. You look at them and you sort of think, well, these are real Mexican dishes, but if you sort of think, oh, well, maybe I would try making one of these and, sort of look online and see if you can find a more cohesive recipe. But to try making, they're big dishes, and they are the sort of thing that you would only make for like a Christmas or a Thanksgiving or a, Easter or, a big celebratory dish, simply because these things take time, and you realize how much of women's lives are dominated traditionally by this kind of labour. This is why these women have no time outside of domestic labour to produce anything, because the domestic labour is so onerous. There's so much of it. And so where does the magical realism come in? Well, it comes in with the cooking. It comes in with the cooking because Tita is unable to express a lot of the things in her life because of this subservient position that she has been put into. She has huge feelings, she has a need to express herself, and she expresses herself through food. This can mean when you ask your younger sister to bake your wedding cake and you're marrying the man that she is in love with, I'm afraid that that's going to go into the cake, which is so her emotion goes into the cake. She makes all the wedding guests sick with sadness. She makes her elder sister, the middle sister, Gertrudis, when she is lusting after her brother-in-law, and she makes the quails with rose petals. Her sister Gertrudis eats this and literally starts to burn with desire and runs off with a band of soldiers. She later on returns to the family, the generale, or the wife of the generale, a very respected woman. But one of the things about Gertrudis which makes her really susceptible to this is Gertrudis is seen as the one who is most like their mother, in spite of the fact that the elder sister appears superficially most like their mother, strict, severe, and intending on maintaining this cruel tradition for her daughter, who is the only child that she has, which motivates Tita to stay with the family in spite of the fact that their mother has died, because she wishes to protect her niece from her sister's cruel intentions. She wishes that this practice, she be the last person forced into this practice, which the fact that we are reading the story from her great niece. The story, her great niece is the one who is going through the book and telling this story. So we know that she is successful in this. Even from the outset, we know she's successful because she is the aunt. She's the great aunt who had spared her mother this cruelty. But Gertrudis is most like their mother because Gertrudis is their mother's illegitimate daughter. Their mother, her severity is, unlike Rosaria, an instinctive part of her personality. Her severity is actually her shutting down because she had gone outside of her marriage and actually had a daughter. So Gertrudis being illegitimate and being therefore not bound by the same sorts of rules that bind her elder and her younger sister as legitimate daughters, she has an entirely different and much more dangerous, because she does leave with the soldiers. She leaves the safety of the domestic and the reputable world, which this is traditional patriarchal society that we're talking about. A traditional patriarchal society, generally speaking, has a tendency to punish women who transgress those traditional roles. So Gertrudis is radical in that, but she also, her birth the situation around her birth does have a tendency to free her of the obligation of traditional life. Now, Tita is forced throughout the novel to reckon with this, and it is difficult for her. She is forced to reckon with her love for her sister, but also the fact that she is treated as less than. The fact that in a traditional patriarchal system, her unmarried state renders her less than, renders her dependent, renders her a servant in her own home. She has to, like any servant, keep on good terms with her masters in order to be provided with the bare necessities of life. So even though theoretically she is an inheritor of part of this ranch, one would assume, but she's been put into this position, the same position of a patriarchal society that leads everything to the male offspring, and therefore female offspring are dependent upon the charity and the goodwill of their brothers. So you see the entirely precarious nature of women who do not have, any women who do not have, when they do not have independent legal protections, economic and legal protections. Now, Tita is a marvelous cook. She has a skill that technically could take her places, but those places would always be places of servitude, because by the time her mother dies, she's outside the eligible age to marry. So she will never get that household of her own, because that is the only way within this particular structure that women can have any power, is that power within a marriage. So it's very much critiquing all of these ideas. It's not, part of the reason why it is so easy to engage with is it is a romance. The romance element is very, very strong throughout the whole thing. It's a love story. I won't spoil the ending for you. But it is very much focused on the women, and it's very much focused on the political and social, more the social than the political elements of that, and that is highlighted through the magical elements. Now, are we necessarily these are not magical as in she's casting spells. This isn't that sort of magical. It is this influence that she has. We see these things happening and they are inexplicable. But we just believe okay, Gertrudis burned with desire and went off with the soldiers. The wedding guests all found themselves inexplicably overcome with sadness. Probably those wedding guests understood exactly what that wedding was. I very much doubt that the groom looked particularly happy either. So it's not a metaphor. It is, this literally happens magically, but it literally happens, this transference of emotion. It is not only this transference of emotion, but it is the understanding the constraint of expression that women have in this world. So part of the reason this book is so incredibly well known is that in 1992, so 3 years after it was published, there was a Mexican film made of it, which is, I think, where I think I saw the film before I saw that. There is also now a ballet of this, which is that would be an unusual adaptation of this, but it is an immensely popular piece. It is, if you are dipping your toe into the magical realist genre, it is a really, really accessible piece, and it is a really good example of how magical realism is not like fantasy. How it is completely not like fantasy, how it is more the inexplicable, and how the inexplicable allows the discussion of things that is probably harder to discuss directly. It is a really, really fascinating book. It has that social, political edge to it, but unlike many of the other books we're going to have a look at, because this is a woman writer, the political edge is feminist, as opposed to some of the others that we will have a look at, where the political edge is much more external politics. Her politics is the politics of women, women's lives, women's power over their own lives, and women's subjugation to domestic labor. So, a really, really fascinating book. The use of magical realism is very powerful in the book. It really helps to convey a lot of the meaning that belongs in the book, and that and it's a very good example of it to start as a reader of this style of writing. So would like to highly recommend that you read Like Water for Chocolate, and actually if you can find it, the movie is really, really good too. So anyway, that's all for me. Peace and love, guys. Peace and love. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.